Good evening. I saw you bouncing your head to the
I was
music.
dancing along to it a little bit.
When it's this time at night, and you're mountain, right? That's 6 p.m. So you're like anything you can do to kind of keep yourself going. So yeah, a little music. Good evening. Welcome to the Messaging Matters show. I am your host Todd Jones, and I am coming to you. We are going to talk about writing for humans and writing for robots.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I have my special guest today is Maddy Osman, who is the author of that book, and we will be discussing that. Maddy, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's always nice to talk shop, somebody who gets it and somebody who lives in that world too.
Yeah, it is. And I like to say we just come on here and geek out about whatever it is that we're talking about. I've geeked out about brand manifestos, community. I've geeked out about Facebook or, well, cookies and that kind of stuff. Not actual cookies, but,
Right.
cookie marketing.
The
We've geeked,
non-tasty kind.
yeah, the non-tasty kind. We've geeked out about a lot of things. I actually have some ideas for next year. I do have this is a little housekeeping here. I do have someone scheduled for next month. I will be working on getting that. It will come at a different time. We're not going to do 7 p.m. because she lives across the planet, and she would be like 3 o'clock in the morning there. So we're not going to do that. And she's a content marketer as well. So we'll have her on, and then I have in mind some folks already for next year. I'm kind of shooting for the stars because I got some content heroes I'd like to have on. And by the way, I'm supposed to tell you hi for somebody.
Who's that?
Andy Crestadina. Did I say his name
how
right?
lovely.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah. Andy and I were chatting on LinkedIn. And he sent me I bought his book, the new book, or not really new. And it's like, I said, dude, this is like a college textbook. So it's huge. But I told him, I said, I'm having Maddy on because Maddy on, I think he has a thing in a testimonial in your book.
He does.
And,
He is actually the front page testimonial.
Right. So he said, well, tell her I said, hey, which I guess means that he probably wasn't going to be able to watch live, which is fine. He's a busy man.
He's a pretty busy dude.
You have actually the thing I like about some of these testimonials. You have some of my heroes in here. You got Kaylee Moore,
many of my heroes as well.
Yeah. So Jimmy Rose, I know Jimmy. So yeah, Aaron Flynn. I think Joe Casabona at the end. So you got some of my heroes in here, and so this is the book. Pull it up. It's called Writing for Humans and Robots, and the subtitle is The New Rules of Content Style. So we're going to discuss this book and just set up the fountain of expertise from Maddy. But before we do that, I don't know if everybody knows her very well, and
probably not everybody in the world.
Not everybody in the world, but maybe a few people know who she is. But let's ask. I'm going to ask you some questions. Kind of fun. Hopefully, you might hit me. I don't know, but so let's start with this. Do you have a favorite musician or song?
That's a good question. I really like. This is kind of like not a high school. This is like a college love that won't quit. Foster the People, and I think my favorite song of theirs is Houdini.
Okay, I knew you would come up with somebody I never heard of, so which is okay. I mean, different generation, right? Different generation, right? But one of the songs I was listening to before we came on was by DNC. And I was listening to the version in which Jonas Brothers does. So that guy. So I do know that group a little bit. So I'm a little behind on some of the people that are out today, and I tend to gravitate back to my era, which is 70s and 80s. So,
good, but anyway, solid era.
Huh?
Solid era. So
yeah, very solid era. So yeah, okay. So this next one is cake or cookies?
Cookies for sure. I never really liked like buttercream frosting, like really thick buttercream. Like it's always a little bit overdone. So cookies.
You like that on the cookie? the buttercream frosting?
No, I'm
You
saying
don't.
like that's what takes me away from cake.
Oh, frosting in general. Yeah.
Too much.
It's
Too
super
much.
rich. That
Yeah,
stuff's
it's
super rich.
excessive.
Chocolate cake's pretty good, and the wedding cake's pretty good. But yeah, it's hard to beat a good cookie, right? What's your favorite kind of cookie?
Probably just standard chocolate chip, something
Okay.
gooey, like not like a super crisp cookie, something that kind of falls apart in your hands a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. All
That's
right. You have a
that's
place around there where you live that you like to go get a good cookie, or you
mm,
just want to bake them?
I probably would just bake them to be honest, but I do like crumble cookies. One of my really good friends, Sam, she has delivered them to my house for a couple recent special occasions. So
Okay.
now I'm hooked.
They just opened up in Conway, actually, I believe. So
Mm.
I've yet to try it out, but they're like super thick cookies,
Yeah,
and
they're really big. We
yeah.
actually had like a get together recently, and one of the guests brought like a bunch of the cookies, and we
Oh
ended
wow.
up just like cutting them up into like 4 pieces because then everybody could taste all of them. And like honestly, it's just a lot of cookie.
Yeah. Well, as we head into the holiday season, that's cookies are people get together and eat sweets. So I
That's my love language.
sweets. Do you have a favorite sport?
No.
So
That's probably
I
where
don't
we
know
get.
where I saw it. It might be in the book. I think you use it as an example. You said, I
Mm.
don't like football, but if I did, my favorite team would be the Denver Broncos.
That was an example, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, when I watched the Olympics, Summer Olympics, I like to watch the equestrian because I used to have a horse back in the day. So that's like the dreams that I never achieved. And then Winter Olympics, I really love watching any sort of figure skating, solo, partner, the ice dancing. I just think that it's so incredible.
The ice skating and gymnasts, those guys and gals are amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
it,
next level.
so yeah, I tend to be into the traditional sports like in America, which is basketball and football and dirt track racing, which everybody loves, right? So I don't know if you've ever been to dirt track racing or not, but I think they have those up in Iowa. So you grew up in
Uh,
Iowa.
Yeah, they actually have if you're talking about like the dirt bikes, we have a track that's like 20 minutes away from us. So
I'm actually
actually
talking
it's
about
closer than that.
dirt stock car, which is
Mm,
a lot of every rural town in America probably has one. Anyway, that's another. But we have several of them. I grew up in an area which is kind of known for dirt truck racing, and so if you know anything about NASCAR,
mhm.
the stock car, Mark Martin was from my hometown, so
Nice.
he's retired now, so he hadn't raced in a while. But anyway, I used to watch him race when he was getting started as a teenager. So
Very cool.
anyway, okay. Um, when you aren't writing and putting out killer content and all that jazz, what do you like doing?
I've definitely picked up a lot more hobbies during the pandemic. I think work used to be my hobby, which is really sad, but it's true. So nowadays, and I've always liked to read, which helps my work, which is it's kind
Right.
of nice that it works out that way. But it is also like not that it's like work to read, but it's like I am always like overly thinking about, how somebody puts a sentence together or what does this word mean, so I get a little bit lost in the nuance sometimes. But like purely for fun hobbies, I think are things like I really like baking. I've been taking like a lot of master classes over the past like two
Oh yeah.
years so that's been a really great way to learn just new like cooking techniques in general.
So your
I've
hobby
been
is learning.
My hobby is I honestly like a book that has had a really big effect on me is The Artist's Way. And it's all about like for those who haven't read it, there's basically two techniques that the author who's like a Hollywood producer who's had success, what she did to kind of like um to kickstart her own creativity. And one of them is writing daily morning pages, which I'm not super consistent with, but the idea is that you just like write like 3 pages. You kind of like get anything that's in
Mm,
your head, get it on paper. You kind of like address your own inner censor in that
mhm.
way. And I think for me too, it's a way to sort of like think about and like plan my day. and just like address like any like worries I have and just like get them on the page so
Get
that
'em
they're not in
moving.
my head anymore. But then she also talks about doing like a weekly artist date, which is something that you do by yourself for yourself. It's something that's like outside of your norm. So like I did an artist date a couple weeks ago where I went to go see a movie by myself. I went to go see
Mm.
Don't Worry, Darling. And it's mostly because I just like didn't feel like waiting for my husband. But it
Mhm.
was also because I was like, it's kind of a unique experience to go and see a movie like without somebody going with you, like it really like it's like you're kind of there, you're like really focused. But anyway, like some of the other things that that book I think inspired is just the idea of like letting your inner artist out to play. And so what that means literally for me are things like learning more about like hand lettering and calligraphy,
Mm.
um, and it's just like I feel like visuals and like typography, like that factors into what I do with content. So it's like I'm not doing it for work, but it also like does kind of come back to it. And then the other like big thing that I've been doing over really like the pandemic is watercolor and kind
Mm.
of just like learning. There's this one creator, Sarah Cray. She runs this website called Let's Make Art, and I think she's actually based in Arkansas, or maybe it's Missouri, um, somewhere around there. But she does videos where you can follow along. So basically, I just bought like all the paints that she uses, and so now I could do all the videos that
Hmm.
she teaches. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's something really I would like to get into my inner art again too, but that's maybe one day. We always say that and probably run out of time. So, um, but that's great. Actually, that's kind of like journaling, I guess. Are you doing writing that physically in the morning? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I usually I'm an efficiency person. It should be journaling, but I like to do it in Google Docs or like Evernote or something like that, just so that if there is something that relates to work, for example, I could be like, oh
Mm,
yeah, just search it. Here it is.
gotcha. Okay. One last question and we'll get on to the book. By the way, I think we have at least one person watching this, Ron Waterbury from Minnesota. So, hey, Ron. He said crumble cookies are great. So, 4 days of calories in one. So,
Oh my gosh,
um,
that's the problem.
yeah. Yeah. Coolest or best place you have visited?
I'm gonna. It's hard to answer that, but I'm gonna say Barcelona, Spain. That's where I studied abroad. I studied in full immersion. All my classes were in Spanish. I lived with a Spanish host family. I did a Spanish internship, and I just like, I wish like I could live there forever, but unfortunately, my student visa expired. So
What degree did you do in college?
I did a BA in marketing, and I actually like one of the hard things about studying there is I did it as my last semester and I had to take operations management in Spanish, and I was like
Mm.
sure I was going to fail that and like have to do another semester, but luckily what's kind of interesting in Spanish just educational system is there's not a whole lot of like homework in college. It's like, you show up for the class, so attendance might be part of it. You
Mm.
might have like a quiz or two here and there, but it's really like you have like a final and that's like your whole grade.
Oh boy.
But they let you take it twice. Like it's
Okay.
normal. Most students actually take the first one to fail it so they know what all the questions are. They
Oh,
can take it again because I think you have to fail it in order for you to take it again. So
mm.
guess you failed it the first time.
Interesting.
But then they actually let me take it for the second time in English, and I easily passed it then. So
Oh, that's
it worked
nice. They a little sympathy for you, I guess.
I guess so. I'll take
Yeah.
it.
All right. We have both actually put the book up for you to see. Um, so I recommend you going to Amazon and getting a copy of it, or you can go to our website, which I have down there. I think everybody can see writingforhumansandrobots.com. Um, if you are a business that has a blog and you have more than one writer, you absolutely should consider getting this book for reasons we'll talk about. Even if you don't, it still could probably make you a better content writer and do a better job with your blog. First thing I want to talk about is your journey to get to writing this book, because I know that's a big deal, right? You talked about how you wrote for and had several editors you worked with over the years who helped you improve and learn about this. And then also the other thing I thought was really interesting is that I believe you said your dad was an entrepreneur and your mom was an English teacher.
Yep.
So you were doomed or hardwired to be an English freak.
My mom, like, I think I say it in the book, she like corrects me as I'm speaking. That's
Yeah.
not proper grammar. I'm like,
Yeah.
Mom, but you know, vernacular is different than written words. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I can take
My
liberty.
dad had a background in, well, he studied to be a DJ at one point. So he was way better than I was at speaking. I often say he would have been a great voiceover in today's world. But when I was a kid, like a little guy, he was a DJ on the AM radio. So he would correct our speech. But anyway, talk about that journey for you, though, going from the time you started in the business to when you decided to, hey, I want to write a book.
Sure. Yeah, I think you know, a lot of things kind of led me to content throughout my college years and shortly after. And I kind of had this realization that, you know, I did these other things, website design, social media, and I was like, but I feel like content is what I love. And I think that's the thing that like I can do better than a lot of people, and I can create processes around. And I think in terms of thinking about, well, how am I going to change my business from like Maddy Osman, like freelance marketer or whatever you want to call it, to like Maddy Osman, like content creator, which at the time for me, you know, I thought that I was kind of like burning out a little bit. I was kind of like just getting to that point where it's like I like enjoy writing, but having like all these different clients, all these different topics, I just don't think I can do this forever. And so I need to be thinking about, well, what is like the next step? And so that's when I thought really lasering on content. And then by doing that, I can create like a scalable process. And then, you know, the next thing I had to figure out was like, well, if I'm going to have other people like writing for me, like as like Maddy Osman's brand or the Blogsmith or whatever, I need to like communicate to them what my writing process is and what my writing style is. And so that was the genesis of the Blogsmith Style Guide, which is really a document that is to some extent built off of AP style as like the baseline foundational style rules. So if you look at it, you'll recognize a lot of AP style rules. Like we literally say like per AP style, we do this. And then the book came about because during the pandemic in the first year, I always knew that I wanted to do NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, which happens in November every year. And it's just a goal where you can work with other people to accomplish writing. The goal is 50,000 words. And it's typically for fiction writers, but I was like, that's okay. I want to write a nonfiction book. And yeah, so, you know, I kind of like, I knew I wanted to do NaNoWriMo. I had the style guide, you know, the skeleton of it ready to go. And I was thinking, well, what can I write that is going to like add value, you know, that I have something to say about? And I was like, well, why don't I just expand the style guide, add a lot more context to it, add a little bit more process around it, more examples so that it's really clear what you should do versus what not to do. Like taking the rules and actually applying them to real like writing situations that have come up. I mean, a lot of the examples in the book are literally edits that we made to like client content, for example. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's ultimately what brought about the book is just the fact that I knew I wanted to write something. The pandemic was the perfect opportunity because I didn't have anything else to do. And then the fact that I wanted to scale up my agency, and I really wrote this book for my team, but I figured that I could write it in a way that it was useful to other people too.
So it started with the ideal of the Blogsmith Style Guide, and you're kind of expanding on that. Is that what I understand?
That's pretty much exactly it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I've kind of got a similar story, but we're not quite there yet on that because I did create the website copy framework, which needs to be updated, but that's a different discussion. So what I really like about one of the first things I noticed is you have it in three parts. You
Mhm,
have the writing for humans, writing
mhm.
for robots, and then putting it all together. And so it's very technical, but it's also very practical. Which technical should be practical, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not. But you do really. I think you do a really good job. You do the examples really well. We talked about one earlier about the Denver Broncos, whatnot. So what would you say? I mean, in this day and age, I feel like Google is making their system to where writing for humans is writing for robots. We're probably
Yeah,
not quite there yet,
right.
right? But and I know she put writing for humans first because I really think that that's what you should do. But I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that Google has always kind of said in like the different guidelines that they make available to us, which of course represents like a microcosm of like how the algorithm actually works, right? They're never going to give us like all of the factors. They're just going to kind of drip out the most relevant, especially as it relates to providing like a great reader experience. And so yeah, I think like one of the earliest things I remember reading from Google's perspective was like right for the human, like focus on great content and like everything else will kind of fall around that. And it's oversimplifying it to say it that way, but it's like it really begs the question of like when you're creating a piece of content, it's like, did you write it for you? Maybe your ego, or maybe like just like your brand and like, really focusing on sales versus like education, in a place where education might have been more important.
Mm-hmm.
Like who did you write it for? And also, like part of our process, because we're writing content that is designed to be found in relevant search, is exploring things like search intent and why did this person use these words, what were they hoping to see on the other side of things, and sort of just, yeah, like following that, seeing where it goes, and making sure that the content reflects what it is that they wanted to learn. So yeah, just as with balancing between humans and robots, there's also the balancing act between the reader and the brand. And I think there is a way to create like a win-win and then win, if you count the search too, situation. Um, so so yeah, I think it's like it's oversimplifying things to say like just create great content or create great content for humans or whatever. But it is like a good guiding voice to have in the back of your head that like, who am I writing this for? Why am I writing this? What did they expect to find here? And then yeah, I mean, I think that there are certain things too that we do in terms of like our sort of like on page SEO process, where it's like, make sure to use the primary keyword here, here, and here.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we're doing it is not even necessarily because I think that Google needs that. It's kind of like a backwards compatibility thing, where I think that Google is becoming increasingly more sophisticated about context, especially I think like the BERT algorithm update, which for those who are unfamiliar, it basically is just making it so Google can read a query both like the normal way of reading, but also like backwards, and all of the words in relation to the words that they're next to and each other. Ever since that algorithm update, I honestly doubt that we need to use keywords in key signal areas at all, but I'm going to do it because I haven't like fully confirmed that, and because I think Google's still testing a lot of things, and so it doesn't hurt to be backwards compatible
Yeah.
with sort of like keyword
I
usage.
think there could be, you know, how when you're quite not quite sure what you're thinking, but you write it out and then it crystallizes. I
Yeah,
think in some sense it's like a confirmation, right? Oh, this article really is about this
sure.
keyword. Um,
That's a good way to
or
look.
maybe clarify. It's like, you know what? Maybe I should focus a little bit more on this keyword. Um,
Right.
you know, obviously, and really, we still use keywords, right, in
Oh, for
2022.
sure.
But I mean, Google's looking for phrases really anymore. I mean,
Kind of like an anchor, I think is
yeah,
kind of what you're
yeah,
saying. Like Google might still understand what it's about, but that like confirms it.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, just like now, I tell people, it's like, well, it's not really keyword anymore; it's key phrase. Because when people search, rarely do they search one word. we're putting in. Well, now you get to search suggestions from Google, and you see their questions or their phrases, and so the search intent's pretty important in that regard. But I do say, especially for somebody who's not very technical, maybe not in this space, like just make sure you're writing for the human first. But what I like about the robot section, from what I can understand, is you don't throw a bunch of hacks in there. It is very technical, practical information, like, you know, um, put the keyword here in the H2, little things that we should be doing
Sure.
to help Google. But I always tell people, it's like, you remember, I think it's uh, Show Me the Money, the Tom Cruise movie. I can't remember what it's called. Help Google, help me help Google. Help Google, help Google. I'm like, in other words, don't hide from Google what you need, help Google out a little bit. So I think the technical section, or the robot section, it's not about hacks. It's not about tricks. It's about practical, technical things. So let me ask you, I have a few questions, or a few comments, I guess you might say.
Sure.
What is the difference between an SEO title and a page title?
Sure. Yeah, it can be the same thing for sure. And I have heard, and I think I wrote it in the book too, because it really stuck with me. Somebody that I used to work with said something about, we were just talking about, like, should they be different? Do you want a different one for this piece or something like that? And he said something to me like, well, wouldn't that sort of like mess up expectations when that person sees one SEO title, that they're going to click in the search engine results page, and then they get to that actual blog page, and the title is something different. Like doesn't that almost like hurt expectations, and like maybe even create some mistrust, like right off the bat? I think that one way to think about it is like, the title should be fundamentally the same, really, right? It's just different terminology, because for search, again, you're trying to like incorporate that keyword, for us, that like backwards compatibility, because we're just not sure where Google's algorithm is at today. And maybe next year it's not going to matter, but today it does. So it's like thinking about that. But the page title, the difference is that, it's not constrained by things like keywords, except, again, if we're caring about fulfilling expectations on the other end of, clicking that page title. So I think like you do have a little bit more of like creative liberty with putting that together, and, making it maybe more conversion oriented, at least in terms of like getting people to continue reading. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it is a practice at the Blogsmith that we do different page versus SEO titles. But I do think about that in the back of my head, like, does it fulfill expectations? Because if not, if it feels fundamentally different, then we've done something wrong.
Yeah. So in the book, I remember you said you make sure you have the keyword in the SEO title, but not necessarily have to in the page title.
Right.
So when I'm looking at an article that I'm writing in WordPress, which I know not everybody's doing it in WordPress, and there's different platforms out there and so forth. Regardless of like whether it's on one of my sites, I generally use Yoast for the SEO.
Sure.
One of the other sites, one of my client sites, they use Rank Math. There's similar SEO sections. So if you're looking at that on the back end, whether it's WordPress or something else, and I'm sure you have used multiple content management systems, but how did with Yoast or Rank Math, you can actually make an SEO title specifically differently than the page title. Is that similar in other systems, or because I don't, I've never really maybe written a blog post in Wix or something else. Can you do that in other platforms? Is that what you're talking about? I mean,
Yeah, I think most can at this point. I think your point is good, which is that it's probably easiest to do that without a lot of like technical experience, like going into the back end or whatever, with a tool like Yoast or Rank Math. Wix, since you brought it up, I think is a really interesting sort of case study to watch, because I think a lot of people had a lot of negative opinions about it. several years ago that sort of persisted even after they've made a lot of major changes. One of the things I'm most impressed about with Wix is really like their foundational sort of like technical SEO situation. Wix is really a platform, I think, for beginners, small business owners who just want to get a website up that looks decent and performs decent and all that. I think that WordPress is more customizable. I think there's a lot more sort of like integrations and stuff that work with it naturally because it's open source versus a closed platform. But I'm incredibly impressed with like the strides that Wix has made with their platform and making some of, I mean, the fundamental basic sort of SEO things accessible to a small business owner. And I think that like WordPress does have, I think we are right to, as WordPress users, maybe be fearful of like what the immediate future looks like when there is a tool like that that is quite frankly a lot less steep of a learning curve for the beginner.
So does Wix have a way to make a specific SEO title versus a page title?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But I do know that there's other things like it has sort of like an automatic connection to Google Search Console. I mean, you still have to like, connect it or whatever, but it's like it's a lot easier to manage than that same functionality in WordPress. I mean, it's just like it's a lot of little things. And I'm pretty sure they give you that ability.
So in order to do that, like if I'm going to make a more descriptive title, maybe that's a little bit more eye-catching, and then I want to put keyword in the SEO title, that's something you can pretty much do in almost any platform.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think most platforms have adapted to understand that, yeah, there is like a difference between like the SEO stuff you do and then like the on-page stuff you do.
Okay. Just kind of curious. And I guess I caught my attention, like, okay, put your keyword in the SEO title. And I think the big thing for me, the takeaway for me is I don't have to force the keyword in the page title. Right.
Yeah.
Although I still think it's probably a good idea. So that was kind of
it's worth testing, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Next thing I wanted to talk about is self-editing. And I think you had a really good section on self-editing. I really need to go back and like look through that. But the thing that kind of caught my attention, and I think it reminded me of Joanna Weeb. I was on one of her tutorial Tuesday, whatever, and we were talking about writing headlines. And she's a stickler for writing as many headlines as you can for one thing. And she said, you need to write 50 headlines. I'm like, and I put in a Q&A. I was like, even for blog posts? And she said, for everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But, most people like, well, we're doing good if we do 25, right? Anyway, you said 10. For self-editing, 10, right? 10 is the minor.
That's probably the most realistic.
Yeah, the most realistic. Exactly. Yeah. You said with self-editing, and I really like this, and I can't remember exactly how you put it, but read through it 5 times, and you gave practical reasons for it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Let me see if I can find that chapter so I can just kind of like read them off here. But yeah, I think like what
page 147.
it's got to be early on here. What it ultimately comes down to is the fact that you only like, even in writing this book, it's like I had to do separate passes for different things, like formatting versus spelling and grammar versus do all the visuals have like a caption or whatever. And so I think that's most of what it comes down to.
First pass, flesh out unfinished sections. So that's like your rough draft, your rough draft. Second pass, edit for spelling and grammar. That makes sense. Third pass, read your content out loud. I've never done that. Although I might.
Or get a tool to read it to you.
Yeah. So that's it. But I always I know that it takes at least 3 attempts for me to catch everything. Fourth pass, validate creating a content by asking yourself, is this something I would find read, find interesting. I probably don't do. I probably stop after the third pass, to be quite honest with you. And then the fifth one, which is a segue to the next. Well, no, it's not the segue to the next thing, but it's pretty close. Check for, and I really like this, potential, if unintentional, plagiarism, because I think 99% of the people, well, that might be a little high. The majority of the people doing what we do don't set out to plagiarize stuff.
Of course, no. I don't think it's an intentional thing when it happens.
I mean, you get kicked out of college for that kind of stuff, right? And so anybody who's ever done college knows that, and you're like, well, of course I know not everybody's done college, but plagiarism is just it's a taboo no, right? So I like that you said unintentional, because sometimes we get things in our brain, we don't know where they come from, and we spill it out. And so I think that's a good thing. But I really like the 5 passes. Like I said, I probably only do 3, but I need to do a better job of getting the 4th and 5th one. So I really like that. And self-editing is always hard to do for me. And sometimes you're solo and you have to self-edit. I try regularly to get somebody else to read it if I can.
Oh, for sure. If you can, that's the best, right?
Because they always see something that I don't. And some people are better at catching these little things. And we, as the author, read what's supposed to be there, not what
right. Well, yeah. And it's like you read something, like I do this all the time where I read it and I read it based on like what I think I want it to say. But then I actually just like put in a totally wrong word that just looks right. But I'm just like even when I read normal books, I feel like I almost like skim a little bit sometimes. And like usually I'll catch myself and I'll go back. But you just, that's how you read your own writing. You kind of skim it. You're almost like looking for certain things. One thing that I've heard that was definitely not something I invented, but that can help you to like overcome your own bias for your own work is like when you're doing your edits, like change the font, like your Google Doc or whatever, or like make it a different color, something like that. It just like, it makes it look like somebody else's then, so you can be a little bit less caught up in your own bias.
Yeah. I do think, I do a better job catching things when I'm reading somebody else's stuff than I do mine. So, and that's not just reading and self-editing, but that's why I think a lot of business owners need a third person outside their business to come in and take a look. So that's a good value point. The next thing I want to talk about, I have a couple more things, and copycat content. And you brought that up, and I'm not sure that was later in the book as well, I believe. Page 150. I thought that was interesting. Can you talk a little bit about copycat content?
Yeah, 151. Yeah, so copycat content is this phenomenon that I think is very much inspired by the current search engine results page trying to rank in relevant search situation. A lot of companies investing in content and hiring writers that they probably don't pay very well to like, be curious and like investigate. And they end up creating basically just a slightly better version of everything that's already ranking. Maybe they add a new section or they kind of switch things around, add a couple new insights or something like that. And, I think the problem is ultimately that it just like doesn't add value. Mark Schaefer, like many years ago, coined the term or idea of content. Oh man, now I'm gonna forget.
Yeah. I want to say content saturation, but I know that's not it.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, now I'm gonna forget it. But it's just like there's already this huge amount of content that already exists. We continually consume more and more content like every year, like between TV and articles and even like going to a play or something. I mean, there's just so much social media, doom scrolling. And so it's like, I feel like we have this like ethical command really to not just like to add to that without a purpose. And I don't think that it's enough of a purpose to just add a new section or something like that. And so, yeah, there are ways that you can get around that. And I
I
think
agree. I want to talk about that. But the guys from Grow and Convert call it a
mm,
Google research paper. And I think that's a great term because
yeah,
that's what people are doing. They're basically writing their own research paper using the top results of
yep,
Google. I think journalistic skills help people get beyond that
yeah,
because being inquisitive, asking a different question, looking at it from a different angle.
right,
I have what I call my REO framework, and it's basically relevancy. This is pretty simplistic, but it's kind of a 30,000 feet reminder to myself. Relevancy, you want your content to be relevant.
mhm,
Engaging, you want it to be engaging. You don't want it to be dull and boring. And the
right,
last one is
mm,
originality. And
yeah,
that plays into the copycat content. So how can what you're writing be original? So are you saying something different? And me personally, I won't go after some of those topics because they've already been exhausted by
done to death.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've already been exhausted, and some often by writers better than me. And so I will do something totally different.
mhm,
Um, I get some freedoms at Main WP to do that. So I'm excited. Sometimes I do something that doesn't even have anything to do with trying to rank. It's just uberly engaging. So I've done a
mm,
parody of The Night Before Christmas for Main WP.
nice,
I do Q and A's, and I do them a certain way. I don't do a standard Q and A where everybody gets the same question.
right.
But I did one with Santa Claus last year. So Q and A with Santa Claus. I like to do stuff that's off the wall,
Yeah,
different, and fortunately, Dennis lets me do that. So I'm thankful for that. But I do think that people do the copycat content. And what advice would you have for somebody maybe who's hiring a freelance writer to write some content for them to
mm,
help their writer not do that?
sure. Yeah. Well, I think one thing you said is a really good thing for people to think about, which is just like try to like take it from a different angle, even like whether that's like a fun cutesy thing, or maybe it's like a contrarian angle. Maybe everybody's saying this and you're going to go the opposite way. You're going to kind of like shake it up and challenge it. I think angle is a good way to think about not creating copycat content, because it's like you can still like weigh in on the same topic or whatever, but maybe you just switch the frame a little bit. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say, I don't know. There's all this like all the drama about Olivia Wilde and Jason Sudeikis and whatever, blah blah blah. And so it's like, well, maybe it would be interesting to like hear from like her kids and what they think about that. That's like an extreme. And she probably wouldn't let that happen, but that would be like a totally different narrative than all the other like narratives about this latest celebrity drama.
Mm.
So I think it's stuff like that. I think a big and like not easy, but just like available option is to interview subject matter experts, whether that's on, for example, like the client that you're working with, their team, whether that's using a tool, a platform like Haro, help a reporter out to reach, a network beyond yours. And maybe there is somebody in your network who would be a great subject matter expert.
Mhm.
And I think like the benefit to them of participating is, you know, having something they say published in a place where, their audience might be reading that, or maybe it's a totally new audience, maybe getting a backlink. Like I think there are like it's like you're kind of asking for their time. And in some cases they might want to be compensated for that. But in many cases, I think that just by creating a win-win where it's like, I'm gonna promote you, you're gonna get a backlink, like I'm gonna, create some like social and nice images so that this is like a good thing to share. I think that is a really excellent way to go about creating content in general, because it also it exposes you to new ideas that you might not have found in your research, and that's really the biggest reason why you should do it.
I think almost every time I've asked somebody to share their expertise in an article like that, I don't think I've ever had anybody decline me.
It's
And
rare. It's only if they're like really busy, honestly. That's the
yeah,
only time
and
I've
I've
gotten
been
it.
surprised at some of the people that accepted my request. So you do talk in the book about doing expert roundups.
Mhm.
which I thought was good. It was actually an example of doing list posts, but you do, and you have it in your style guide too. I think about how to do expert roundups.
We
So
do.
expert roundups are good for a lot of different reasons. It's actually a reminder to me to consider doing that again. I haven't done one in a while, but it's a good reminder. I'm going to end with this question, and I think it's probably the most important question: is how important and who should
Mhm.
have a style guide, a content style guide.
Love that. Everyone.
Yeah,
Because it's so important.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier today, which was like, anybody who works with like more than one writer, I think that like I should have made a style guide for myself even before I started to build out a team, think about expansion because the first style guide basically it came about, the Blogsmith style guide came about when I hired my first editor. And I was like, well, I need you to be me, So we're gonna have to collaborate on this. And it was basically like, okay, whenever, like you edit something and then I look at it and I add like something that you didn't, realize that I wanted you to do, for example, like let's drop it in this document, and so started very rough. Um, I would say that even before that, like I took a stab at like, okay, here's how we do headings, here's how we do links, like
Mhm.
here's how we do visuals. And then it started as a skeleton. We did edits. So it got fleshed out with a lot more, context examples and just kind of like working through things that happen time and time again. I think another thing is like when you work with certain writers, you kind of like get to this point without a style guide where you're just editing the same thing over and over and over again. And part of it is like, well, if you never tell them that that's a problem,
Right.
they don't know because that's just their style. Like
Uh,
it's not that like they're making egregious mistakes or something like that. It's just that's their style and this
mm,
is my style and it's different.
right.
Um, so I think the main benefit of a style guide is that it prevents having these edits over and over and over again, and it's just like demoralizing to keep going
Yeah.
into these documents and being like, why am I editing this again? And it's like because you didn't tell anybody that like that's
Right.
important. So yeah, I think everybody should have one. I think to your other point earlier, not a whole lot of people do. So that's the challenge. But it really is a time and effort saver over the long run.
So just listening to what you said, it sounds like it didn't happen overnight. You started it,
Oh,
it kind of evolved. So if I'm a business and I have a blog and I say, "Yeah, I'm going to tackle this style guide," and I buy me a copy, and if you're going to do that, I would recommend getting a physical copy of it.
mm,
The ebook's great, but you're going to need
yep.
a physical copy of it. I fun fact: first time I bought this, I bought the ebook, but I meant to buy the physical. I had to go back and buy the physical. So I bought two copies. So that anyway, and I got it a long time ago, and I thought I got a month to read this, and then I started getting sick and with
Oh,
ragweed and stuff. So anyway, I had to hurry up and get through it in the last week to get to the interview. But anyway, if they get a copy of the book and they get ready to tackle it, it's not going to happen overnight. That's
right.
guess that's where I'm at. It take you a while to do that.
Years and multiple people too. And that's the thing. It's like you have to start somewhere. And like if you see my style guide, like don't let it like overwhelm you because just like understand that it took years and I mean we're still updating it today. Whenever something new comes up and it's like I really want to make a rule about this because I feel
Mhm.
like we've already like made these edits before. um we're still adding to it. It's a working document. You have to start somewhere, and starting somewhere and having something is infinitely better than like reinventing the wheel every single day on every piece of content you create.
Now, when you get the book, you give us a copy of a bare bones to start with. Is that what I understand? Is that what
Mhm.
you shared with me on LinkedIn, or is that a full fleshed
That
blog?
that one's a full fleshed out one. So the bonuses that come with the book, which you can find either like at the beginning of the book or there's an appendix at the end with links and stuff like that. The bonuses that come with the book are first of all, oh yeah, I think I do have No, actually, yeah, it's just a fully like fleshed out one. I do
Mhm.
give a template for like a social media version of your style
Okay.
guide that is both blank and filled out. Um, so yeah, like mine's pretty filled out, but I think the benefit of using that as sort of like a template for yourself is like you can look at it and be like, okay, we do that. Yep, agree with that. Uh-huh. And then you can also say, actually, this one, we're the opposite of that. And then it's like, but you
Right.
kind of have like the prompt to make that decision versus like trying to come up with, all this stuff from scratch.
Does yours live in Google Drive? Is that what you lit yours? Yeah.
Yeah, for now it's a Google Doc. We are working on a couple of projects. One is like the nicely designed PDF version, so almost like an ebook. And then we're also making an online version of the style guide that's kind of like, like an ebook that lives on the page versus like a downloadable PDF. So that's the next iteration of it. I want to make it accessible to anybody who wants it, beyond the book, beyond the Google Doc, which, once like more than 10 people are in there, it just starts to freeze,
Yeah.
which is a bad experience.
I'm
So,
thinking about Conway scene. Like I said, I've had a couple student writers this year, and they're the second girl's about hers. She just turned hers in today, her
yeah,
first one in today. So we'll actually have two out by both the girls, and they did a great job. But I need to do one, and I'm thinking, what's the best way to share it? And I have a tendency to put something like that in Notion, but I'm thinking it
no,
might be one thing to put it in there and like work on it, but then transfer it to a Google Drive where they can access it real easily. I think both of them can access it with Google Drive.
yeah,
So
Notion's interesting because we did have a version of it in Notion for a while because I basically wanted to create like a channel in the Blacksmith Slack that like whenever there's a style guide update, I would put it in Notion and it would ping the channel, here's this new update. So Notion could be a good place for it. I ended up not wanting to update it in both places. So that's
well, I would think I have an account for me and I
mhm.
don't have team members on it.
Mm.
So Google's probably a better spot to put it, I
It's
think, in
it's
that
nice to
regard.
collaborate, just like writing in general. It's like you can add suggested edits, you can add
Yeah.
comments. It's yeah, it's easy to update without like messing up formatting. So I mean that's what we've been doing since we created it. So I
Probably
agree
what
with
I'll do. I think, and there may be a lot of people in the digital community, WordPress, whatnot, are listening to this who have blogs for their company. I think that's the next step for many of them. Probably is buying a copy of your book and getting started on their style guide.
do it.
Do it, or
Do
we're
it.
gonna haunt you. Hey, thanks for coming on the show and geeking out with me about stuff that I don't geek out about enough, and helping us learn a little bit more about this kind of thing.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff. And like if anybody here wants to geek out about it further, I'm at Maddy Osman on Twitter. Always open to a conversation about content.
Yep, and the website for the book is writingforhumansandrobots.com, right?
Right.
And the
Yep.
company
And you can
website is
download a free chapter there as well. If you're not totally sold yet, it's my favorite chapter, which is about word choice and being really thoughtful about that, which I think is the best way to open it up, really.
and the company website is theblogsmith.com. Is that right? Yep.
That's right. So if you want to
So
see examples of our portfolio, clients, and process and things like that,
and
and
you
check.
can Google Maddie and find her anywhere. I will let you know that she used to be a gymnast. So
That's what the Google search results say about the other Maddie.
the
The
other Maddie, yeah,
other
yeah.
Maddie.
Yeah, you were more of an equestrian girl than a gymnast girl. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very
kept it
good.
simple.
Thanks for joining us tonight on the Messaging Matters show, and be sure to check out the website writingforhumansandrobots.com. Get a free sample of the book from the chapter from her website, or just skip that and go straight to Amazon and buy it. Um, I think the price is worth it. If you hired Batty to come do a style guide for you, it costs a whole lot more. So I would go ahead and just get the book. So,
There you go. Pro tips.
all right.